First of all, let me thank you, the organization, and all those people that are uh, responsible for putting this gathering together. I am very honored to be part of your gathering and to be able to share thoughts with you. Um, I always, when I'm in a classroom, for instance, teaching a course, I uh, I always tell my students, hey, you know, uh, especially in the context of a guest lecturer, it's kind of like being a member of the opposition and in parliament or in a provincial legislature. You can say anything. Why? Well, because you're not really responsible for making the real decisions. And so when I'm a guest lecturer, I always tell my audience, I can say anything. Afterwards, you can tell your organizers, Colette, Amory, and all the others uh, about any questions and so on. Did he really mean that or what? So on. But let me introduce myself in Blackfoot. Nistuan nakok ikaskiniwa inaksiks kanawa ksokitapio edenuktu tsitapi. My Blackfoot name is Lowhorn. I'm of the Small Ropes clan. I belong to Kena, better known in English as the Blood Tribe in southern Alberta, and we belong to the Blackfoot Confederacy. What I would like to talk to you about today, most people probably don't know, or not that they don't know, but don't often think about. Most of the time, every morning, we simply get up and do, but we never stop and think about or question the foundational basis of what we do is based on. And that's very important because those foundational bases I refer to as our metaphysics, our paradigms that we use on an everyday basis. See, and that's what guides us about how we interpret that world out there outside of us that we think is reality. So let me get into it. So next on the slides, you see, all societies at one time or another lay claim to a territory. However, that society comes into existence. You might want to ask some social scientists or philosophers like John Locke or Rousseau and other social scientists about how a society comes into existence. But that's a different topic. But once that society comes into its existence, they claim it, sooner or later, they claim a territory. And within that territory, through all the mutual relationship they have with the totality of the environment. And this includes the sky, in other words, the cosmos, the plants, the land, the animals, and so on. It, it, you know, the mutual relationship with the ecosphere, you know, through time, over a period of time, a culture arises. Now, that culture consists of paradigmatic concepts, customs, and values. Now, those paradigms are those concepts and ideas for interpreting reality. And they include belief systems. Okay, next. And customs are those parts of a culture that speaks to how we do things within a society. They're the accepted ways of doing things. Now, these may include how we organize ourselves, governance, marriage, upbringing of children, food sourcing, and so on. In other words, there's many ways, and there are accepted ways of doing things. A culture also includes values, value systems. And they are those aspects built into the culture that serve as incentives for the members of the society, either for reward or recognition, so that they adhere to the culture. But values also serve as standards and goals that members of the society can aspire to. Say, next. Now, all humans, just like all other animals and plants and so on, have some basic need to remain human and to survive as humans. So, all humans need an interpretive tool, which is based on those paradigms to make sense of the sensory intake that we go through. See, in other words, if you want to think about ourselves as computers, hey, that computer that we're sitting in front of has an intake and an output, input and output, say. And that input through our sensory intake is what all of those experiences we have sooner or later become an interpretive tool for relating to everything outside of us. See? And that interpretive tool is shaped by the totality of the culture one grows up in, which in turn is shaped by the totality of the ecosystem, including the land, animals, plants, and cosmos. It comes back to that. See. Next. So, this need for an interpretive tool is what is meant by paradigms of a culture that members of that cultural group use on an everyday basis. See, that's what we use on an everyday basis. Paradigms are embodied and largely unspoken aspects of a culture. That's what I meant when I said we get up every morning and we simply do, thinking that that's the way it is. But when you really stop and think about it, that reality out there is really our interpretation. See, it's really just our interpretation. So our interpretation is not the reality. And this is what people mean when they say, this is the way it is. It's natural law. These are usually the quick general explanation of this need for an interpretive tool for what a society calls reality. In other words, all humans have a need to search for the meaning of life and existence. And see, those interpretive tools, and that's all they are, interpretation. And yet, we fight wars over them. See, just think about Israel and the Palestinians. How long has that war and difference been going on? And that's because of a difference on their interpretive tool. See, next. So, what I'm going to go through here, I'm going to look at mainly from a Blackfoot perspective, because that's what I grew up in. It's the language I speak, but I know that it's very similar in Nuu-chah-nulth, in Salish, and other tribes. So let me explain what it looks like when I'm talking about an interpretive tool from a Blackfoot perspective. See, in Blackfoot, we are thinking about our thinking process is such that everything is always in a state of motion. That's what we're referring to as flux, constant flux. And I jokingly say, hey, try and make an appointment with a Blackfoot. And they'll say, hey, yeah, I'll be there at 2:00. We'll meet at 2:00. But if I'm not there, I'm over at my grandma's, okay? And if I'm not at my grandma's, I'm over at my uncle's, if you see my truck over there, see. So in other words, because things change all the time and so on, that's what we mean by flux. And that flux, in other words, the existence consists of energy waves. Whereas, in fact, those energy waves are what we refer to as spirit. And that's why our people are very spiritual. Everything in the Blackfoot way of thinking is animate and is imbued with spirit. Those trees out there, the river, those animals, even the rocks, have spirit. They're animate. See, everything is interrelated. Our elders are always talking about all my relations. Well, when we're talking about all my relations, in fact, we're not even talking about human relations. We're talking about those trees out there are my relations, those rocks, those mountains, the river, and so on, the stars are my relations. They all come together. If I were to just, before we change, if I were to make comparisons, say, where there's flux in Western thought, it's stagnant. Einstein, for instance, says God does not play dice with the universe. In other words, in Western thought, everything is stagnant. It's not about flux. Existence is about matter. It's not about waves. Everything is not animate, just you and I, and of course those little birds and so on, animals, may be animate, but the plants, the rocks, and everything else is inanimate. See? We may start out very broad, but we always come to the point. In other words, we don't talk about relationships. In subatomic physics, we may start out with an atom, we break it down into, break it down into smaller parts, protons, neutrons. We break those down even into smaller parts, electrons, etc. We finally come down to neutrinos and quarks. And as we speak, they're still looking for an even more primary particle at these particle accelerators like the one in Geneva, Switzerland. See, very different way of thinking. Next. See, in Blackfoot thought, we have to renew things. In other words, renew those factors and conditions that make for our existence. Because we live in a very narrow gap of ideal conditions for us as humans. That's why some scientists say that we are an accident of nature. In other words, all the right conditions just came together in the right time at the right place for us to come into existence. Well, there's a realization that we have to, from an indigenous point of view, we have to maintain those factors and those conditions for us to continue as Homo sapiens. See, because if we don't, if you play around with those ideal factors and conditions, add to them, change them, take away from them, you may not last for too long. And in fact, there are scientists today that are already talking about the new species that's going to take over after Homo sapiens are gone. I jokingly tell people, I used to text Neanderthal man, but where is he now? Say, he's no more. In other words, the right factors and conditions did not continue to exist for him, and we're still around. Land is a major psychological reference for indigenous people. That's why we're always talking about land in our relationship with Euro-Canadians. Say, land, even though that flux is going to change the land sooner or later, at least it doesn't change as fast as other things. So we can hang our hat on it for a while, at least for the time being, for the fulfillment of physical needs. And of course, language acts as a repository for the knowledge, the overall knowledge that we gain in this relationship we have with the totality of the environment that we grow up in. And because things are always moving, it's such that languages like Blackfoot are action-oriented. They're process-oriented. Unlike English, a Euro language, which is simply kind of like noun-oriented. I don't even want to say that Blackfoot is verb-oriented, because even the word verb is a noun. See, you begin to see the difference. Okay. Next. Yeah. See, now, when we're talking about wellness, I wanted to mention a little bit about the hierarchy of needs by Maslow. And I don't mind talking about these hierarchy of needs because Maslow was taught those needs by Blackfoot Indians. He got those teachings from the Blackfoot. However, I do have a little bit of concern with those needs for two reasons. He left out spirituality, and he presented them in a hierarchy. But I don't think the Blackfoot would have ever talked about them in a hierarchical sense. I think they would have more taught, taught about them in a holistic, relational way. Okay. So having said that, there's the notion of physical needs, everything required for physical existence, food, shelter, and so on, harvesting, medical, and so on. All those were the kind of stuff that the Blackfoot were saying. Here are the kind of needs we need physically for humans to exist. Yeah. Next, security needs. These were the needs that include customs on how we protect ourselves from enemies, animals, disasters, spirits, if we want to say aliens, weather, and so on. Talking about the weather. Hey, you know, we're we're dealing with unusual weather for this time of the year. Geez, unheard of to have 100-degree weather, you know, especially on the coast. You know, that's unheard of. The need to belong. Humans have that need to belong. And this includes customs revolving around biological, social organization, such as extended family, relatives, gender roles, and so on. That's why we have clans, societies, tribes, confederacies, and so on. Yeah. Next. And then there's personal needs. These would include customs revolving around things that we do for recognition, you know, worth and contribution of individuals, the recognition of skills and knowledge of individuals, practices in the upbringing of children to make them aspire to higher cultural goals and to high standards. And like I said, Maslow left out spirituality. These would include customs and practices, recognizing that all of creation is a spiritual gift. Next. And if you have all of these needs, you become a self-actualizing person. When you are brought up in a sea, free from stress, have feelings of security, belonging, personal worth, and you are steeped in spirituality, that person becomes complete. That person becomes self-actualizing and is healthy. Well, when you have a whole society that's self-actualizing and healthy, well, then your tribe as a whole is healthy. See, and that's what we need to get back to, because today in our world, there's so much stress, and people don't talk too much about the stress, but stress is a key factor behind a lot of the illnesses, ailments, and so on that we're suffering from as a society. Next. So my wife, Amethyst, outlined self-actualization as follows. Given the opportunity, a culture attempts to mold its members into ideal personality types. The culture of the Plains Indians, for instance, are no exception to this rule. For the Blackfoot, the ideal personality is one that shows strength, both physically and spiritually. He or she is a person who is generous and shows kindness to all. He or she is a person who puts the group's needs ahead of individual wants and desires. He or she is a person that grows in wisdom. He or she is a person that's steeped in spiritual and ritual knowledge. Next, he or she is a person who, in view of all these expectations, goes about his or her life and approaches all my relations in a sea of friendship and in an easygoing manner, humor and good feelings. He or she is a person who attempts to suppress inner feelings, anger, and disagreement with the group. He or she is a person who is expected to display bravery, hardiness, and strength against enemies and outsiders. He or she is a person who is adaptable and takes the world as it comes without complaint. See, that's a self-actualizing person. Next. See, these kind of things, when they develop and you become aware of the foundational basis, like social values, as we said, are those aspects that are built into the culture and that are used by the society as standards to judge specific acts or goals to strive for, and as incentives for rewards and recognition for members of the society. Well, we can begin to ask ourselves, how many of those traditional values that we used to use that we've lost, and how much are still kind of on the fringe of our everyday life? See, wholeness was one of those values. It's the value of wholeness speaks to the totality of creation, the group, as opposed to individuals. We're always thinking about the bigger picture, the larger group, and not just about me, not just about the individual. Next, the wholeness value tells the members of the group, if all did their part, social order would result. If the whole is maintained, beauty, harmony, and balance results. Another value is kindness, and it means that harmony, it's harmony in interpersonal relations, joined to the capacity for caring, the resulting behavior is friendship, caring, amiability, mildness, acquiescence, and so on, as Dumont, you know, explained it. Yeah. Next, honesty is about truthfulness and integrity, conditioned by respect. It results in tolerance and equanimity, respect for others, and a highly internalized conscience and sense of worthiness, honor, and loyalty. But see, so many of us today don't trust anymore. Why? Well, we've been colonized. Honesty is really not a big part of Euro-Canadian culture. That's why we have to sign for everything. We have to swear over Bibles and so on. See, whereas honesty in traditional times, if you say you were going to do something, that was that was good enough. See, sharing is about generosity. It's about cooperativeness and collective well-being. Strength means strength of character, self-mastery, fortitude, peace, and harmony. So you begin to see that when you apply these traditional values, how they hold the group together. Yeah. Next. So if a person was brought up in or lived in a cultural sea of Blackfoot or indigenous paradigms to utilize in their search for the meaning of life and existence. If a person lived by these customs and practices to fulfill his or her needs, if a person lived up to and aspired to the standards set by these social values, that person would become a real Blackfoot, self-actualizing, for instance, in our case. So being real Blackfoot, being real Salish, and so on, see, brings about wellness. Next. So, with that type of a background, okay, with that type of a background that I've just given, let me change the tune just a little bit. See, today, we live in a world of specialization. In other words, in Euro-Canadian culture, when you first meet somebody, they ask you, the first thing they want to know is, what do you do for a living? And so on. So they say, I'm a lawyer, I'm a teacher, I'm a plumber, maybe with pipe dreams. But When you meet another person, an indigenous person, the first thing they want to know is, what tribe do you belong to? What clan do you belong to? And so on. Oh, yeah, yeah. Maybe we're related. See, the upside of specialization is you get to know everything within the specialty. The downside is you don't know much outside of the specialty. One has to depend on other specialists for anything outside of your specialty. In other words, knowledge is narrowed down to the specialty, and creativity falls by the wayside. In other words, because there is no experience outside of the specialty to draw on. Next. See, wisdom arises from a multiplicity of experiences and in different contextual settings. You've all heard of Jack of all trades, master of none. The generalist context of our Homo sapien existence is what allows us to seemingly rule the world, we as humans. In other words, I can run a little bit, but nowhere near as fast as a jaguar. I can swim a little bit, nowhere near as good as a fish. I can climb trees a little bit, nowhere near as good as an orangutan. But I can do all of those things, a little bit of all those things. See, if I use the fish as an example, you know that fish has been around for millions of years. That fish existed and was around way before the dinosaurs. Well, and that fish is still around. And we respect him. We respect that fish. It has lots of knowledge. But he's a specialist in a certain environment. If you were to take that fish and throw him out on the beach, and you threw me into the water, I bet you I'd last longer in the water than he would on the beach. Why? Because I'm a little bit more adaptable than that fish, because I can draw on a whole bunch of stuff from my multiplicity of experiences. See, you see the point? Next. See, in our modern society, guess who is the specialist? In other words, non-indigenous society is the specialist. And indigenous society are the generalists. We are the generalists. And that's what has given us continuing survival. We've survived residential schools. We've survived all these pandemics that came our way. We think about COVID-19 today. Well, think about the pandemics that happened to our people. We survived them when they were introduced because we had no immunity to them. But we survived. Why? Because we were generalists and not specialists. So when we're talking indigenous resilience, resilience exists because we are generalists. Our cultures reflect that generalist notion. So if we're going to continue that surviving, we have to maintain our language because that language, as we said, is a repository of the knowledge that we've gained with the totality of the experience within our cultures. So guess why our elders emphasize experiential knowledge? You begin to see the picture. Yeah. Next. If we come back to those metaphysics that I was referring to that form the foundational basis of our thinking processes, we relate to the land as part of all my relations. Why? Because it is real. It's tangible. I touch it. It's real. It is tangible and something we could actually experience through my sensory intake. See, whereas in Western thought, the main referent is time, which is an abstract notion. See, so think of it, land and the notion of time. Land is real. I can experience it. I can touch it. Time is just an abstract notion. It is not tangible. In reality, there is no such thing as time. The only time is now, just right now. The rest of it is human-made and so on. There's no such thing as time. Next. So When we're talking resilience, from an Indigenous perspective, our resilience arises out of our approach to life as generalists and our relationship with the land. Generally speaking, humans are walking down the specialist road. In other words, the majority is dragging us along. We're going down that specialist road. Do we really want to continue down that path? In other words, down the path to our disappearance? Indigenous lifeways will slow down at least our trip to human extinction. So my message with all this is hang on to your indigenous cultures. Sing the songs, tell the stories, and do the ceremony. That's what will prolong human existence. But in the meantime, that's what gives resilience to our people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Little Bear. We really appreciate you taking the time to come to our presentation today. Yeah. And for all of our participants, Dr. Little Bear's presentation is going to be posted to the FNPSS YouTube channel. So if you ever want to go back and rewatch or you want to review anything, it will be posted there. And yeah, I wanted to thank you once again, Dr. Little Bear, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm very honored to have shared thoughts with you. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think now we'll move into, if anyone has any questions, yeah, feel free to post them in the chat for Dr. Little Bear while he's still on the line here.
Can I ask a question or just comment?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Sure.
So, Janessa Collins. My name is Quistietko. My English name is Janessa Collins. I'm from the Inklakatmuk Nation in Merritt, BC. And I just want to thank you for your presentation. I've read a number of your articles, and your views on Indigenous knowledge and reconciling Eurocentric values with Indigenous ones have led the way for a lot of the HR practices at our agency. And I guess I was wondering your thoughts too on the axology of indigenization in the workplace while maintaining and reconciling the requirements for legal and that Euro-Canadian standards that get tied in with our agencies and our employment. You know, we really have to still adhere to these standards despite the movement for indigenization and looking to incorporate Indigenous knowledge. So I guess I'm wondering, how do you see that reconciliation moving forward in the workplace too?
Well, the thing is, sometimes we get impatient, but things do change. And the present government has just moved and is moving towards adopting full adoption of the UN Declaration into Canadian law. And that's going to really bring about indigenization to a large extent to Canadian law. But the other thing is that there are a whole bunch of UN declarations, UN conventions, and so on that have been signed by Canada, and they are signed by Canada, and yet they, they're not part of the education system. See, these conventions on civil and political rights, on genocide, on the rights of women, and so forth. There's just a long list of them. And they should, those, because they have been signed by Canada and agreed to them, they should be part of the framework of all institutions, and including corporations and so on. See, they should be part of the school system because our country, Canada, signed those documents. In other words, they're Canadian, and they should be part of the education system on an everyday basis. And yet, we never hear about them. See? So, if we wanted to speed up this notion of indigenization, that's what should happen. Yes.
Coach Jan.
Thank you, Janessa, for your question. I think we're just running a little bit short on time, so we might have to end the questions here. But thank you, Dr. Little Bear, for answering that question for us. Yeah, so I believe we're going to go to Michelle now. We're just going to do the last few draws. We have a few door prizes to give out again today. So maybe I'll hand it over to Michelle now.
Oh.
Great, thank you, Liam, and thank you so much, Dr. Little Bear, today for all your words. Very, very thankful. So today we've got a few door prizes, again to Massey Books, which is 100% Indigenous owned and operated bookstore, and as a member of the Stolo Business Association, they find unique and unusual books from around the world and bring them to you. So I'm going to just pull up my wheel here. Great. So it looks like we have everyone here. We'll do our first spin. Brianna. Congratulations, Brianna. Go for another one. Oh. Brianna's feeling lucky today. And we'll do one final draw. And Mary, congratulations, Mary. I will be in touch with you both.
Great, thank you, Michelle. So next we're gonna hand things over to Amory, and he's just gonna introduce Kumo Space because we'll have that optional networking afterwards. So for anyone who wasn't here yesterday, we're going to have Amory introduce Kumo Space to us.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So I've posted a link in the chat to a networking space. So it's still going to be a virtual space, but if you click on that link, it'll take you to a website called Kumo Space. And when you arrive at that website, there'll be 4 rooms set up. So there's a general networking room, and there's a room for CPHR, BC, and Yukon, and Tim Reed will be in that room today. So if you want to learn more about CPHR, BC, and Yukon, please go into that room. Tim will be in there waiting as well. And I got a message from Scott Siemens, who was doing the conflict resolution toolkit breakout session. And Scott is going to try to make it back for the Kumo space portion of this event as well at noon. So hopefully Scott will be in one of those rooms. So if anybody has any questions for Scott, feel free to join that room as well. For those who may not have been here yesterday, the way that you kind of move about in Kumo space is just with your arrow keys. So when you're in the room, you'll see kind of your video screen pop up, and then you can move your icon and camera around the room itself. And there'll be a radar screen around your picture as well. I'll kind of give a quick share screen here so that people can see what I'm talking about really quick. So yeah, you use the arrow keys to move around the room. You can use the plus or minus keys to make your map bigger or smaller. There's an exit button on the bottom if you want to leave the room you're in and enter into another room. And then, as I was saying, there's going to be a circle around your video screen. So you'll only be able to hear conversations from people who are within that circle on your screen. So if you wanted to go and sit on a virtual couch with somebody, you guys can both move to that one space on the webpage and have a conversation there. So I'm going to leave that there. So the link is there, and maybe I'll have Callan just email the link out to all of the attendees again today. Because once Zoom closes, you won't have access to this chat or that link. So if you haven't clicked on it, you won't have it there. So that's the Kumo Space networking event from 12 to 1. But before I give it back to Liam, I just wanted to give a big thank you to all of the FNPSS staff that have been working really hard behind the scenes for the past 2 days to make sure that everything's running smoothly here on Zoom. I'd also want to give a big thank you to the advisory team. So to Kathy, Marianne, Madeline, Larry, Elsa, and Kayla. We've been working for a couple of weeks now to bring this agenda together and bring all the speakers and presentations together for you. So I just wanted to give a big thank you to the planning team. And I think I can speak on behalf of Colette and myself when I also want to give a big thank you to Liam. Thank you for guiding us for the past couple of days, Liam. It's been awesome. And I just want to, again, just raise my hands to everybody. Big thank you. And looking forward to seeing anybody in Kumo Space this afternoon. I'll pass it back to you, Liam. Thank you.
Thanks, Amory. And one more thing before we hand it off to Elder Prince. We're also going to be having a survey for all of the participants. I'm not sure if someone can post that in the chat right now. But yeah, if you have some free time, we really appreciate your feedback on all the presentations. If you want to do the survey for us, that's greatly appreciated. And I think that's everything that I needed to cover. Maybe we'll go into our closing remarks from Elder Prince, if you're ready.
Good day, everybody. Thank you for having me here. It sounds like you guys are doing some very fantastic work out there, and it's not only just one thing. It sounds like you guys are doing many different things, and your responsibilities are very great, and it really sounds inspiring. And I hope all the success for each and every one of you. And thank you, and I'm very honored to be here today. I would like to mention about, in the beginning when I was doing the prayers and stuff, opening prayers and stuff, I thought a lot about, or I talked a little bit about self-care, taking care of yourself, looking at the past and keeping yourself going forward to your future and stuff. And I thought that was very a good way to start the program, because as you guys talked, I heard a lot of talk about just the time that I was in here. I heard talk about more of the self-care, like the resiliency and dedication and stuff. So when I started off about the self-care, like being loving and caring and courageous and having courage and being able to speak your truths and stuff. I have a story, and this story is about the lame girl. And my dad told me the story when I was small, but I didn't really remember it. And then one of the elders wrote it out for us while we were in the university, and so I was able to memorize it from there. So I'm going to tell you guys that story because it's along with a lot of the stuff that's going on, like even with all of the sad news of finding more grave sites and stuff in other communities, especially in BC, where it seems like it affects the whole BC. And so with the words of taking care of yourself that I started off with, I want to go a little bit deeper into that resilience and courage and confidence and a way of being to reestablish your morals and values. And I think this story will actually help in discovering. So this lame girl, she couldn't walk properly, and she her arm wasn't really as perfect as her other arm. And when she would walk around the village, a lot of the other girls would make fun of her and laugh at her, and some of the boys would tease her, and sometimes they were even a little bit rude and threw stuff at her and stuff. And they treated her really bad. And as it went along, one day the chief was son. The chief lived a little bit above, like there was a little rock cliff, and then some bushes and stuff, and then the main village was there. But the chief's and his family lived up on top of this this little cliff, and his son was going to go look for a wife one day. So he said, I'm going to go down to the village, and whoever makes a pair of moccasins that is waterproof, that's the girl I'm going to marry. So he went down and he announced that to all the girls in the village that he was going to look for a wife, and whoever made the moccasins that were waterproof would be the girl he would marry. So all of the girls went running home, and they told their parents and their grandparents. And this lame girl went home and she told her grandmother, yeah, the chief's son is looking for a wife, and I need to make a pair of waterproof moccasins. And she says, okay, well, start cutting, and I'll get some materials you're gonna need. And so as she was sewing, she cut out the patterns, and as she started sewing, her grandmother gave her fish eggs, dried fish eggs, and said, chew on these fish eggs, and every place that you sew, put those fish eggs on there. So she started doing that, and she finished her pair of moccasins, and she went up to, all the chief's son was sitting by the water on a stump, and he was trying on all the girls' moccasins, and as they were all lined up in the line. And when she got to the lineup, the girls that were in front of her looked back and they said, how come you're here? Like, he's never gonna marry you. Like, look at you, you're just a lame girl. And all of the girls that came along with their moccasins, they pushed her out of the lineup and told her just to go home, and pushed her down. And as the chief was trying on the moccasins, he would walk in the water and his feet would get wet, so he couldn't find any girls never made no waterproof moccasins. And so the last one in the village was that lame girl, and he went, all the girls in the village couldn't make a pair of waterproof moccasins, but with the teachings of her grandmother, her moccasins, when she presented them, all the girls were still standing around saying, there's no way you can make waterproof moccasins. And so the chief's son put the moccasins on, and he walked in the water and his feet stayed dry. And the chief's son didn't want to marry that lame girl, so he decided he was going to change the rules. So he says, well, this girl is the only one that made waterproof moccasins, but without really thinking about it, I think that the woman that I really should marry is the one that follows me back to my home. And so he took off running and he started running, and all of the girls got the news and they said, oh, we have to follow him. And so they all started chasing him. And then the lame girl went back to her grandmother and said, I'm the only one in the village that made waterproof moccasins, but he didn't want to choose me. He said that whoever was going to follow him back to his home up the cliff was the girl he was going to marry. And so her grandma gave her a bear claw, a weasel skin, and an eagle feather, and said, here, you follow him right away. And so she left with and when she got to the tree line, there was so much really thick bushes in there, and all the girls were trying to push through this thick bushes, and that young chief's son kind of went through the bushes. And so she pulled out the weasel skin and she turned into a weasel, and she was able to maneuver through the bushes, and she started to catch up to him. And then after the thick bushes ended, there was some big logs and rocks and stuff she had to climb over. And so she pulled out the bear claw and she started climbing over these logs and these rocks. And then it got to the face of the cliff. And that young chief's son was climbing up the side of the cliff really fast. And so she pulled out the eagle feather, and she turned into an eagle. And when the young chief son got up to the top, his dad was standing there, the chief, and he says, I thought you were going to choose the woman who made the waterproof moccasins. And he says, well, only the lame girl, but I didn't want to marry her, was the one that made waterproof moccasins. But so I changed the competition so that the woman could be healthy and strong, because they're gonna bear my children, and I need them to be strong. So I told them whoever followed me back up to my home is the girl I'd marry. And then the lame girl was walking up the hill, and he says, you weren't supposed to change the rules. And the lame girl only needed purification, and you should have learned this at a younger age. And I feel bad for not teaching you. So you're going to have to build a sweat lodge, and you're going to have to go through the purification process because your mind and your heart aren't aligned. He says, but it'll take 4 days. He says, and you bring the lame girl in with you. And so he built the sweat lodge, and him and the lame girl went into it. And every day that they came out, they were brushed down with spruce boughs. And on the 4th day, when they came out, the lame girl didn't have any more ailments. Her bones and everything were all in normal condition, and everything was normal on her. And when they cleaned her up, she ended up being like the most beautiful girl in the whole village. And the young man was very humbled about the mistake he made in his mind and his heart. And he went through the purification process. And the lame girl, who was now the most beautiful girl in the whole village, had gone back to the village to see her grandma. And all of the girls came running up to her, and they started crying, and they were apologizing and how mean and how selfish and how rude they've been to her throughout the lame girl's life. And the lame girl stood in front of all of the girls that had hurt her and pushed her and said, all of you girls have treated me very badly while I was growing up. And now that I don't have any more ailments on me or anything, I just want you all to know that every time that you've pushed me down or every time that you've called me names, I've never ever thought anything bad about you. I've always had a deep love and forgiveness for every one of you, and I've never ever thought anything bad, even though you were treating me bad. I still never thought bad about you. I know, and that made all the girls even cry even more because they could not understand that there was such great love available in that kind of. And so not only did she become the most beautiful woman on the outside, she also was always the most beautiful woman on the inside. And so that was part of that was the story that my dad had told me, because he always wanted me to look at everybody as beautiful on the inside and outside. And one of the things that when I heard the discussions open today about resiliency and dedication, I realized that our culture is full of a lot of resiliency, and you know, the resiliency that comes from the true culture is not about fighting the unseen forces that we sometimes have to face anyway. It's more about keeping the true cultural attitude full of the morals and values. That's what I want the resiliency to really focus on, is the healthy resiliency that's going to protect all of those good things that we have in ourselves and in our history, you know. And we have to be careful moving forward that that resiliency doesn't turn into anarchy or hate or racism. And so that when we talk about resiliency, I want that resiliency to be protecting of our morals and values as we move forward. And I really appreciate all of the good things that you guys are doing and the resilience that you guys portray, and that and you guys are prime examples of that historical resiliency that we carry in our culture. And I really encourage that you pass that to everybody and everybody around you, that that they too understand that resiliency the way it is in our culture. So thank you for having me here today. And I'd just like to say in our language, to the Creator, to thank Him, even that, and no matter where on earth that we walk, that we'll always do our best, and that He would have the mercy and kindness towards us for our help when we need it. Yudagi Nezalcho Sucho Nezilzai Nke Andit Nezit Nesatil Etwin and Atasha Nastains Ella in Cardnat Nauchni Masin Ke Suhote. And yeah, thank you everybody for having me here. And it was Masi.
Thank you so much, Elder Prince. We really appreciate you taking the time to close out our session for us and telling the story of the lame girl. That's very powerful. And for all of our participants, just a heads up that we're going to be sending out an email to everybody that attended with links to all of our resources from the past 2 days. And before we end the session, I just wanted to thank everybody who worked so hard to put the past 2 days together. There's a bunch of people behind the scenes who have made the past 2 days run very smoothly. I wanted to thank all of our presenters, all of our panelists, Dr. Little Bear and Elder Prince as well. And I wanted to wish everybody a good day. And on behalf of the team at the First Nations Public Service Secretariat and the BC Federal Council, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us for our 2021 Collaborative Learning Days. And we hope to see everybody again sometime in the future for future sessions. And thank you.